this great story from Genesis chapter 32. Jacob is facing his day of reckoning, the dreaded time when he must try to make peace with his brother Esau. You remember the story how Jacob was the younger of a contentious set of twins. He chafed at the reality that in that culture, only the firstborn son would get all of the family blessings, all of the riches, all of the inheritance, the privileged position. Any son born after that first was a nobody. Nobody. Jacob thought that this birth order custom was unjust and plotted to take things into his own hands. What he couldn't change by the accident of timing, he sought to undo with his craft and his guile. One day when they were older, he took advantage of Esau. When Esau came in the house very hungry, and he convinced Esau to trade his birthrights for a pot of porridge. Momentary satisfaction. A bad deal for Esau, a very good deal for Jacob. And so he had corrected the accident of birth by moving up into the first position in his family heritage. Then a bit later, with his mother's help, he tricked his father into giving him the highly prized family blessing as his father was approaching his own death, thereby securing the two important things in a family in that day, both the birthright privileges and the family blessing. When Esau realized the full extent of the deceptions, how his blood brother had swindled him not once but twice, he vowed to kill him. And Jacob does the only prudent thing. He leaves home in a hurry, trying to get out of the way of his brother's rage. As he leaves home, he finds a safe haven in his uncle Laban's house, not too far away, but far enough. And there Jacob becomes wealthy in his own right. He marries two of Laban's daughters, ends up with 11 sons and who knows how many daughters of his own, supposedly to live happily ever after, away from home. But there's a nag in his life, an itch he couldn't scratch. There was unfinished business that kept his life in turmoil. And so 20 years after he has left home, it's time to face the music. Time to try to make amends with his brother Esau, the one he has swindled twice. Time to see if the family ties can be reunited. So Jacob is determined not to return home like a prodigal son with hat in hand, begging for mercy as a compensation for the life that he has been living. Jacob, you see, has made it big with Uncle Laban. He has prospered, and therefore he can make a significant peace offering to Esau when he meets him, one that perhaps will cover over the animosity that has existed between them. And this is his peace offering. 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels and their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. Not a bad gesture to try to soften up his brother, earn back perhaps his brother's affections. And all this has been carefully orchestrated by this calculating guy called Jacob. He decides that when they approach each other, he and Esau, he will send the goats in first, 200 of them, and then 20 male goats. Then will come the sheep, then will come the camels, then will come the cattle, and finally the donkeys, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. 5 waves of gifts for the wronged brother. This will be followed by his maids and their children, and then his wives and their children. And at the end of the procession will come Jacob. All of that ought to soften the heart of Esau, he thinks, even though I'm sure that Esau has been brooding over the injustices for those same 20 years. So with all that planning, everything in readiness, the animals and the wives and the maids and the children make their way across the river Jabbok. And tomorrow will be the encounter. Tomorrow he will meet with his brother. But Jacob stays behind that night to be by himself, hoping for a good night's rest to prepare for this fateful meeting. But then as we read this, there was this strange account of a wrestling match between an unnamed adversary and Jacob himself through the night. There's no rest for Jacob, but rather a physically draining contest with this opponent. And so we can kind of psychoanalyze what's going on here. Is this a symbol, a dream, a nightmare even, of Jacob's continuing contest with brother Esau? Perhaps. Or is this a contest between Jacob and some God figure with Jacob's soul hanging in the balance? Or perhaps this could be a confrontation of Jacob with himself. Jacob with Jacob, the good and the bad of this complex biblical figure, who is at first a conniving crook who causes havoc in the family, and then turns out to be the beloved father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, the wrestling match seems to end up in a draw, both wrestlers physically spent, until Jacob suffers a wound to his hip, an injury that results in a limp. Jacob is given a new name, Israel, the one who strives with God for his efforts. And perhaps most significantly, he receives a blessing from this wrestling opponent, a blessing now that he has earned in contrast to the blessing that he has swindled from his father 20 years earlier. And so as the day dawns, Jacob journeys to meet his brother, a meeting that goes better than Jacob could ever have imagined, thanks to the forgiving, gracious spirit of Esau, the older brother pushed aside, but who reaches out in reconciliation to this conniving younger brother. But Jacob goes with a limp, limping his way to this reconciliation with Esau, into this new role of being the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. I love the story. And the question is, what do we make of it for our own time? How does this story become something more than just a quaint thing from the past, and something that we could appropriate for our own lives? Well, I think the first disclaimer we need to make is that when folks tell us that all of the answers to all of the social ills around us would be to just return to the family values we find in our Bibles, be careful of that one. be reminded of this story of a dysfunctional family and many others in the Bible that talk of deception and exploitation and incest and abuse and murder in families. These are the family values we would pass on? I don't think so. And there's also the danger of saying that there is only one kind of description of a family in the Bible, when in fact there are many family units that are described. In this story, Jacob has 2 wives and 2 childbearing maids. I doubt if we really want to go back to that. But more importantly, the lesson I take from that story is this. We are not destined to be living fairy tale lives with a minimum of difficulties and the stunning postscript at the end to say, and all was well and they lived happily ever after. The truth is that you and I live in a hard knocks world. And if you doubt that, read a newspaper or listen to a news broadcast. That we may start out when we are younger with the naive notion that with grit and luck and talent and good intentions, our lives will be wonderfully different from the lives that other people are able to live. That we'll be freed from the troubles and the compromises and the mean things that conflict in other people's lives. We'll be special. We may even think that our faith in God, our intention to live good Christian lives, will somehow insulate us from the dire consequences that plague those about us that we feel sorry for. And I think it's true that as parents we try to shield our children from some of those realities, protecting them as much as possible, to try to soften some of the rough, harsh edges that life will have. But in truth, we are flawed people who live among other flawed people. That we are more selfish than we want to be at our best. That we are more competitive than we suppose. That we are more irritable and unpleasant than we want. And that we act more out of self-concern and self-protection as often as we seek the genuine good of the neighbor. And all of that makes for a messy business. And to use the images of this story, we often wrestle with adversaries. Sometimes they are ghosts from the past, reminders of mistakes made and lingering feelings of regret and sorrow for things we cannot undo. And sometimes they are contemporary challenges as we confront tasks that have not been accomplished and issues still unresolved and postponed encounters with those we are out of sorts with that we are delaying to another time. And there are those struggles within ourselves. The urge to do the good for the neighbor and the conflicting nudges to take care of our own business. The impulse to be loving and forgiving and caring and genuine, and the competing urge to hunker down, take care of ourselves. Let them flounder around if they are so inclined without us. You see, we would like to stride confidently into every new day as if we knew what we were doing, assured of our ability to be a child of God as we want to be. That's the way we wake up in the morning. But more accurately, we limp into our futures, do we not? Hobbled by the accumulation of all that has shaped our lives so far, all of the compromises, all the scars and wounds and hurts that have indeed left their marks on us, mindful of the regrets and the lost opportunities, The deeds that we wish we could undo and the words we wish we had back and not spoken in the first place. All that more is the limp that we have as we walk into each new day. We are not perfect specimens of God's created order. But we are still God's blessed and beloved children, no matter what. The wrestling may leave its mark, but the limp can be a sign of honor. For we have contested with all of those things, all of that, and we are still here. Still making our way into God's future, limping, yes, but alive and still blessed. Limping Jacob faced his estranged brother, and that broken relationship was healed. The family was reunited, reconciled, made whole again, and there was a promise of a new day for all of them. And so we too limp our way into God's promises, thankful for the forgiveness of a new start that begins every time we awaken, grateful that there is still time, hopeful that God is a God of mercy and of forgiveness, and it's extended to us. So take solace in the limp that may still mark you as a child of God. It's both a sign of our past and an indication of God's acceptance of God work that is still before us and to which God invites us every day we get up. Amen.